Welcome back to Washington Watch. My name is Joseph Backholm. I'm sitting in for Tony today. Glad that you are here with us. An elementary school just outside Denver, Colorado is getting pushback for its plans to hold a monthly Families of Color Playground Night. According to reports, the racially segregated playtime was scheduled for the second Wednesday of each month, but was canceled due to COVID protocols. The plan now is to reschedule them in the new year. What are we to make of schools promoting racially segregated playgrounds? With me now to discuss this is Virgil Walker. He's the Executive Director of Operations for G3 Ministries and the co-host of one of the best podcasts in the world, Just Thinking. Virgil, welcome back to Washington Watch.
It's a joy to be with you. Thanks for that introduction. And again, thanks for having me.
Hey, we're glad to have you. In the past, people literally gave their lives to eliminate segregated spaces based on skin color and in the pursuit of equality. How is it now that schools are recreating segregated spaces based on skin color, but also doing this in the alleged pursuit of equality?
Yeah, I think you were spot on with the way you framed the question. What we've witnessed during the course of the 60s, the late 60s, early 70s, even in the 50s was the push of desegregation, right? The push of civil rights leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King, who said we should be judged by the content of character rather than the color of skin. And what we're witnessing in woke culture is really this idea that segregation is now in vogue. I mean, if those segregationists from the 1950s and 60s actually found themselves walking around today at Centennial Elementary School, they would be rather excited about what they saw with regard to this segregated time for families of color. This is absolutely socially acceptable racism. This is socially acceptable segregation, and we should call it exactly what it is and be about eradicating it.
And Virgil, explain this to me, because I'm a firm believer that very few people do things they believe to be irrational. There has to be some kind of logic to this. What is the logic of wokeness that leads them to believe that racially segregated playgrounds is some kind of a benefit?
Yeah, well, I think there are a number of things at play. You've got the issue that most those in the woke culture embrace, which is the victimology, the victimization of certain classes of people. And so every opportunity that presents itself, there's a need to find a new group of victims. And so in this case, they found families of color to be the next victim class that they wanted to grab onto and push out at the fore as someone in need of their help and assistance. And all this is a massive virtue signal by the school. The folks who decided that they were going to put this together have been trained in CRT, understand what it means to bring in the socially equitable learning processes that we see that permeate CRT. And this is all of what we're seeing kind of at the fore.
And to your point, you just mentioned CRT. Do you think this is evidence that despite the insistence of some, CRT actually is in the schools?
Yeah, it actually is in the schools. The thing is, what they're doing now with language is the whole point and process of CRT and those who advocate it is it's about deconstruction. And so what they're trying to do, you have the Dean of Culture, Nicole Timbrock. She's trained in social emotional learning. What's happening is no longer are schools, they recognize that most of culture realizes CRT is destructive. And so the languages begin changing. And what's happening is they're infusing CRT within things like social emotional learning. They're infusing it in ideas like having a dean of culture and diversity. So those are the kinds of ways that they're couching their critical race theory in plain sight.
So what is it about CRT? What does it teach that would lead people to then conclude, well, we should create racially segregated spaces in playgrounds?
Well, the idea behind it, at least those who spoke about it, said families came to them, Black families in particular, and were looking for an equitable outcome, an equitable outcome regarding their ability to connect with one another. So in the mind of those who would advocate for critical race theory, the equitable outcome would be to take from one group of people in order to give to those who are disadvantaged or less advantaged, rather than seeing that the real need was for people to actually come together as one human race under the banner of unity and humanity. They made the decision to segregate them. If you take the time and look at any of the diversity statistics or even the demographics of the school, what you'll find is the school is primarily white and Hispanic. There's only maybe 3 to 4% Black students. So I'm curious, when they add things like people of color, who they were actually referring to. Was it the Black students? Were Hispanic students included in that process? Furthermore, and I'll say this, and I'll turn it back over to you. I'm shocked by the idea that a school that has 3% Blacks could not figure out a way, outside of having the playground segregated for themselves. They could not figure out a way to have a playtime at the local McDonald's down the street.
Well, my assumption is that families of color would include Hispanic families, but Virgil, in about 30 seconds, is it your perception that families of color, however you want to define that, want spaces separate from white people?
Again, I think this was a massive virtue signal. I don't know that that's true. I can't ascertain the motivation of those who came to the school and were asking the kinds of questions. I do think those questions that you're asking bear, investigation. They bear ferreting out to see, where did this originate? From whom did this idea originate? So that we can get to the crux of the issue.
Virgil Walker, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.